and myself, along with my friends and colleagues from Calvin and Cornerstone, Grand Valley, Hope College, we are all privileged to work together and also to have these two wonderful panelists be with us today. Last week, we talked a little bit about job search strategies during uncertain times, and today we wanted to kind of pivot and talk a little bit about how you can put your best foot forward. So thinking about that, we're talking about personal branding, and we have two individuals here, Rachel Bartels Gray, Executive Director of Hello West Michigan, and Marianne Bachheim from X-Rite Pantone. They are going to introduce themselves and share a little bit about what they've learned along the way. Now, I'm here with my friend and colleague, Bridget Wade, and so we will be coming back to join you afterwards for questions and answers, but I'm going to turn this over to Rachel, and here we go.
All right, thank you very much, Dana. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our PowerPoint. So all of you should be able to see personal branding in the virtual world, our title slide there. Let me know if you can't see it for some reason. There we go, sharing. All right. So thank you very much to Dana for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Rachel, and I'm one of the presenters for today's webinar. Whether you are embracing your learn from home schedule and just waking up, or adhering to an early morning routine, we are very glad that you joined us here today. This presentation will last about 40 minutes, and then we'll have time for question and answer. So feel free to submit your questions at any time during this webinar in the chat function. Someone will be monitoring it, and we'll get to all of those at the end. Also, in your view options in the top right corner, I highly suggest clicking the side-by-side mode. So then you'll be able to see not only the PowerPoint, but then also our faces. Alrighty, so want to do a little bit of an introduction here before we get into the gory details of our topic today. And I'm going to let my co-presenter, Marianne Bachheim-Verhill, go first. Marianne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Rachel. My name is Marianne Bachheim-Verhill, and I'm the cosmetic project specialist over at X-Rite Pantone, where we do a lot of color management for our global companies in cosmetics worldwide. I used to be a teacher, an adjunct teacher at the GRCC in their fashion interiors department, as well as the business department. I had my own business as well in marketing communications, primarily focusing on small startup businesses in the beauty and fashion industry. I was a stylist and makeup artist as well as a fashion and beauty journalist. So that is my lifetime of aesthetics. Rachel?
Thank you, Marianne. So as Dana said, I am Rachel Bartels Gray, the Executive Director of Hello West Michigan. I actually started out at Aquinas College in their Career and Counseling office, and I handled all of the marketing for that department. So pretty fun because I actually used to promote events like this to students, and now I get to be in them. So kind of a fun full circle for me. In addition to working at Aquinas, I also was an intern at Celebration Cinema, a fantastic program for any marketing students out there. And 7 years ago, I started my career with Hello West Michigan. I started with the organization as the program manager, and I never thought that I would be in nonprofit. It was not something I saw myself in. I always saw myself in marketing or advertising. But I found this role, and you know, it's really expanded my view of what marketing or advertising could be, because my role now really encompasses so many more things than just buying ad space and creating ads, which is really, really fun. So I want to talk a little bit about our organization, because there's a lot of things that my organization does that can help students. So Hello West Michigan, we help people who are interested in relocating to West Michigan. So we educate them about what it's like to live here if you are searching for a job or maybe looking for an internship. So if you're getting ready to graduate from college, you can move anywhere. You're not tied down, but it's really important to research the city that you're considering to go to. You want to know if they have jobs. What are their housing costs? Can you pursue your hobbies there? Our website, hellowestmichigan.com, answers all of those questions about West Michigan. So after today's presentation, I encourage you to take a few minutes and check out the site. You can upload your resume if you're currently searching for a job or internship. You can search job openings. You can research our member companies, which is a great thing to be doing right now if you have a little bit more downtime. You can also find different networking groups. So maybe what is an appropriate group for you to plug into and expand your network after you've practiced all the tips that Marianne and I talk about today. And then you can also learn more about West Michigan. And even if you're from West Michigan, I encourage you to go take a look at that, because if you grew up here, it's much different than living here as an adult. So I went to college here in Grand Rapids at Aquinas, but it wasn't until I started working and became a young professional that I really felt like I got to experience the city and discover it like I was moving here on the very first day. So even if you grew up here, I encourage you to take a look at hellowestmichigan.com. All right, so that is enough about Marianne and I. We want to give you a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. So today we're going to talk about your professional brand, building relationships, and then also using your tools like LinkedIn to really promote your professional brand and build those relationships. Now, if you're thinking that we only created this presentation and it only matters in this kind of virtual work world post-COVID, you would be mistaken. This presentation I actually put together a couple years ago. And you know, as Marianne and I were really discussing the topics today, we found that a lot of the things that were already in this presentation, so already important before virtual work, are still just as important today when we're meeting via Zoom and in virtual situations like this. So keep that in mind, that all the things that maybe you have been working on or are working towards matter just as much in this virtual world. So getting into professional brand. This is a visualization of how I think about professional brand. So normally when you think of a professional brand, you usually think about it in a positive connotation. It's a positive thing. You want to have a positive professional brand. But I'm here to tell you that you can also have a negative professional brand, and you don't want that. You want to build a positive brand, but you can't do that until you've mastered all of the things that are listed here. So if you mess up on some of these things, if maybe you don't dress up as much as you should for the culture of your organization, or your email or your phone communication isn't as great as it should be, those are things that can detract from your professional brand. You want to get all of these things right before you can start building the traits that really become a part of a positive professional brand. You can swing either way, so you really want to make sure that you're swinging positive. So you can focus on building the elements of a positive professional brand.
So one of the things that I've learned, this is a great quote that I had actually recently learned. I had the luck to go to a women's conference that was all about personal branding, and it was hosted by Carol Lempert. She's actually an actress and comedian, and she does this wonderful program for personal branding. And one of the quotes that she gave to us was, "Your brand is what people say when you're not in the room." And that was quoted from Jeff Bezos from Amazon. So really thinking about, how do you want to show up? Who are you? What is your first impression going to be? What is your lasting impression that you want to leave with someone as well? So this is going to start giving you that framework to start thinking about how you're going to show up, that first impression, that lasting impression, and that footprint that you're going to leave along the way as you build your career.
All right, so let's talk about some of those categories that are on the bottom half of that visualization. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of what can really detract from your professional brand. So first and foremost is communication. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And this goes for verbal and nonverbal communication. And now that we've maybe moved to a lot of email, even more so than before, making sure that you really are picking the right communication channel for the message that you're trying to send. We may be sending a lot more emails than we did in the past, and we were seeing coworkers in the office and talking to them when we passed by in the kitchen or in the hallway. So make sure that you pick the right channel for the message. If you're thinking about sending an email to a coworker trying to explain something and it's turning out to be multiple paragraphs long, would it be easier just to have a phone conversation with them and have a 5 to 10 minute conversation because you're explaining something? So think about which channel you want to use when you're for the message that you have. Also texting. As a young professional, texting is probably not the way to go unless you already have a relationship developed with that person, or the person that you're communicating with has told you, this is my preferred method of communication. If they say, text me so we can schedule something, then listen to what they tell you. Follow the directions. But if you're just starting a relationship with someone, phone and email are much more preferred and more accepted. Also, think about small talk. It is a skill that you need to learn and you need to practice. You really need to be able to master polite conversation about unimportant or uncontroversial topics. One of the easiest ways to really kind of engage in small talk is to draw the other person out and to ask questions. People love to talk about themselves. It's a fact. And so if you ask questions about them, not only does it get you off the hook for coming up with something to say, but it also gives you the opportunity to learn about that person. And that's what you want as a young professional. You want to soak up as much knowledge from the other person as possible. But when they're talking, make sure that you listen. So, and I understand that the environment is so fast these days, and sometimes, again, texting is necessary, but make sure you're asking what method they want.
For small talk, here's a good helpful hint. If you can do a little research ahead of time, if you know for sure who you're meeting with, you can do some research and that will give you some ideas of some questions to ask. It is agreed that it's going to be harder if you've never met the person before and you're in a very new environment. But if you have opportunity to do any research in anticipation with who you're going to be meeting and speaking to, do a little research on them, their background, and it'll give you some ideas for conversation starters.
All right, so email. Of course, this is one of the top things that you're going to be doing with employers. A lot of times it's the first touch point that you have with an employer, especially when you're applying for jobs online, or in our current situation where there's no more networking events in person, or there's no more career fairs in person. A lot of times you're going to be interacting via email. So people still form impressions about you via email, even if they haven't met you. So you want to make sure that the email is well composed and it's getting across what you want to achieve. So first, let's talk about email address. It's the first thing that an employer is going to look at even before they look at the subject line. So make sure you have an appropriate email address. If you're still using your personal email address from middle school or high school and it's got kind of a weird or fun name, you probably want to transition to a Gmail account or use your school email. The subject line. Professionals are busy. They look at their inboxes more than anything. So make sure that your subject line is descriptive. So an employer already has an idea of what they're about to read before they've even opened the message. For example, if you're going to email me, Rachel Bartels at hellowestmichigan.com, don't put Hello West Michigan in the subject line. It doesn't tell me anything about what the message is pertaining to. And if I ever want to go back and refer to it, I am never going to be able to find it via search because every single one of my emails says Hello West Michigan. Think about proper grammar. Even if you are applying to a super cool, hip marketing firm, this is not the time for improper apostrophes, punctuation, or grammar. You want to make sure that it's very clean and very professional, because that super hip marketing firm is not going to hire you to write slogans or copy if you don't know where apostrophe goes, or if they think you don't know where apostrophes go. So that's really important. Also, emoticons. Again, we're in this virtual world with a lot of email and a lot of written communication. So if you're trying to make a joke or be lighthearted and you can't do it without an emoticon, is probably not the best joke to make via email or in written communication. Make sure that you follow the directions. This is probably my #1 pet peeve when it comes to students, or really any email. It's not even students that don't follow the directions. It's every other professional that has too many emails in their inbox, and so they respond to them very quickly and they don't follow the directions. So make sure that you read your replies thoroughly. If they ask for time availabilities to connect with you on the phone, give them a few choices. If they tell you to call them, then call them. Even if you're not a phone person, you need to give them a call because that's what they told you to do. And lastly, your email signature. Make sure that you have in there your contact info and tell them who you are. An example of my student email signature is up on the screen, and then what it looks like now as a worker. Marianne, tell us your thoughts about interacting with others via email.
So one of the big things too is know how soon to respond. So I think timing is really important. So know when a response is required versus would nice to have. Quite often people get inundated with the thank you emails that may not be necessary, but know when a response is necessary. And are they expecting a reply back? So maybe it takes a little bit more thought on your part to make sure that you're using a little deeper thinking. You know, should I be responding to this? And then what my response should be. How quickly should I be responding? Does this person need a response right away? And then, is there any reason why that person might not have received your email? So if you know that you've maybe had some problems with your email or with texting, things are getting stuck, people are not getting your messages, you might want to double check. Send them another message. Go into your sent box and look and see if it has actually sent, and if it warrants a phone call. So one of my experiences with a student is that I was expecting a response. I got no response. I actually expected a couple of responses to emails, and I had not received anything. I ended up reaching out to that person like the night before we were supposed to meet, saying, "Hey, I have some questions. We have this COVID-19 situation on our hands. I have some questions for you." And then he immediately had sent me a text, but I also let him know that, "Hey, I sent you an email as well, and I need some additional information. Can you please contact me by email?" So I ended up not getting a lot of information until the very last minute. So sometimes it's, to assume that they have what a person has what they need. You might have to do a little deeper thinking, and assume, gee, I responded to them, but I've never heard back from them. Maybe I should reach out to them again. So in this case, I never got the emails. And also, before you click send, reread your emails. So again, to Rachel's point, looking for any grammatical errors, any typos. I've seen some very, very funny typos, but probably not ones that you'd like to send to somebody you don't know or don't know very well. But the other thing is as you're writing, is that the message you want to convey? And how will you be perceived by your reader? So our written communication tells somebody a lot about our communication style. So if you want to come off as very friendly or warm, what type of words are you using? Or are you coming off as very transactional and very cold? Is it necessary? Is it you? Is it your brand? So just rereading your email before you send, and does this sound like me? So just a helpful tip.
Great tips. Thank you, Marianne. The part about responding in a timely manner is so, so important. So just want to reiterate that for all students, especially if you're trying to get something from the employer, whether that's an informational interview, time with them, you're shadowing with them, you're asking about the status check of the job application. This is your opportunity, so make sure you're getting the right message across. So now let's talk about phone skills and phone interviews. This is really important because a lot of times an employer is forming an opinion of you without necessarily seeing you. So all of the things that you want to portray, like confidence, and organization and cordiality, all of that has to come through in your speech, in your voice. So it's really important that you follow some of these tips. So you want to speak clearly. You want to be excited. Don't mumble. Don't be chewing gum, even if that's what helps you calm down a little bit, because we can hear it on the other end. Only answer the phone if you're able to speak. That's one of the hallmarks. You don't want to be in a noisy area. You don't want to take the phone call if you can't really talk to them. Make sure that your personal cell phone has a personal voicemail memo, so that if an employer gets your voicemail because you let the call roll to voicemail because you weren't in a quiet enough place to take the call, that's fine, but make sure that it's a personal voicemail memo so that they know that they reach the right person. If you're calling someone and you have to leave a message, it's not really fun to get 4 missed calls but no voicemails, especially 4 missed calls from the same number. We want to know why that person is calling. So make sure that you leave a message and that it's clear and that you leave your number immediately. And again, don't do text messages unless they've asked for that. Marianne, how about you?
Yeah, and as you're speaking to somebody on the phone, if something's not quite clear, don't be afraid to ask for clarification. In other words, don't play along. Don't pretend like you understand what they're saying or the direction that they're giving or something that they're asking. I say this quite often when people have accents. So I know that when I had started with X-Rite, I had 4 different interviews. And out of those 4 different interviews, 3 were with 3 different countries. So, and I was not real familiar with the accents. So sometimes they would ask me questions that I had no idea what they were saying. And I didn't understand the accent well enough. Now it's easy because I do it all the time. But if you don't understand, it's okay to ask them to kindly please repeat. I'm not sure that I understood you clearly. You can also summarize what you think you heard. And then if there are actions coming out of the meeting, summarize what you think you heard and the actions that you understand need to be taken going forward. This way it avoids any misunderstandings and you know that you have understood everything nice and clear. If for some reason you do have to reach out to somebody and you're calling outside of a scheduled time, always ask, is this a good time for you? I know it kind of grates on my nerves sometimes when people call me and I don't necessarily have the caller ID attached to a phone number. I'm in the middle of something deep and somebody just starts talking. They just start throwing out tons of information. They didn't ask me, is this a good time for you? Because sometimes it's really not. So always ask that first. And then always thank somebody for their time as well, especially, again, if it's not a scheduled time in which you're speaking with them. So always thank them for their time.
For sure. I can repeat that one as well. Again, especially if you're doing an informational interview or you shadowed with someone, that's not something that is necessarily a part of my job description or Marianne's or any other professional, but they do it because they want to connect with the community and we want to give back. And so thanking someone for their time always really goes a long way. Also, summarizing and confirming, that's a part of active listening, which is a really desirable skill with employers. So making that a part of your communication practice can be a really, really great communication tool. So now a lot of you might be wondering how this changes for COVID times. A lot of employers are actually embracing video interviewing. So they may be skipping the phone screen and jumping right to the video interview. So if you're not having a phone screen, but you're doing a video interview, how do some of these things change in the COVID world? And the answer is that it really doesn't. You'll see a lot of these tips are the same. Really, one of the biggest things is to speak slowly and make sure that you understand what they're talking about and what's going on. Alrighty, looking at first impressions. These are based on more of what you don't say. It's not what you're saying, it's not what's coming out of your mouth, it's what you're saying when your mouth is closed. So does your handshake and your body language show that you're confident? Does your attire show that you care? Now again, some of those things, probably not shaking a lot of hands in COVID time, but it's still important to think about and to remember. How do your nonverbal actions present what you want to present? And then again, thinking about the phone, your equally important is your voice. You want to speak up slowly. You don't want to mumble. You don't want to abbreviate. You want to say please and thank you because it goes a long way.
So a good thing with the first impressions as well is like starting out with what's most important to you and then running with that. So that way you're remembered. One of the other things too is stay away from negative response, like negative context. So if you stay away from any negative context, you also will support that good first impression as well. Being authentic, just simply be who you are. So it's not to say that you can't just show up in your pajamas and your messy hair. No, you can't. But putting your best face forward and just being who you are, it also helps take away some of the nerves. So if you are nervous, if you just stay true to who you are and say, you know what, this is simply who I am and I can't apologize for it. I'm going to put my best face forward and either you're going to love me or you're simply not. But that helps kind of calm the nerves. So being authentic and showing up to the party as the person exactly who you are, what you will be embraced for that. That will also start cultivating some genuine interaction and hopefully a relationship that evolves from that as well. So I think that's all I have for first impressions. So, and again, to Rachel, to your point, it's no different than if you're going to meet somebody face to face in the real world. And we also have to remember too that a lot of the virtual stuff, it's here to stay, but the situation will evolve and it will be different going forward. So we will still see people face to face once again at some point. So just translating those concepts, both face to face and virtually, it's the same thing.
Exactly, it's the same thing. Anything that's important in a first impression in person in a physical space is also important when you have a first impression with someone in a virtual space. These things are still important. A couple things that we do add to the virtual first impression list is lighting, your background, and your camera height. So lighting can be really important because sometimes if you sit in front of a really bright window, your face might be completely washed out and the person that you're talking to can't tell any of your facial expressions because they really can't see your face. On the other hand, you don't want to be somewhere where it's too dark or maybe there's a window behind you and you're backlit because that makes your face very dark. So think about some of those things. Practice with someone either on Facebook Messenger with your laptop webcam or some of the other programs. A lot of people, your friends, are probably willing to help you with that. Also, make sure you check your background and your camera height. If you have your phone, you don't take a selfie from down below, right? You take it from up above because we don't want to see all of this, our chin, which is not a great angle for most people. So take that into consideration and put your laptop up on a box. Don't put it down in your laptop when you're having an important meeting. And then also, even something like your charger. Is your laptop going to last through the end of an hour-long meeting, if that's how long it's going to be? Make sure you plug that in ahead of time so you don't have to pause the meeting in between. And then of course, backgrounds. I think almost every web platform has options for backgrounds, either blurring it or picking a photo to go behind you. So play around with those, pick one that's appropriate, pick one that makes sense for you, and go with it.
A couple last things is remembering when you use your computer. On some platforms, there's a delay. So when you're speaking, it's really hard to manage sometimes, I will admit that, because especially if you have multiple people, because there's the delay and you're trying not to interrupt anybody, but you're looking for that opportunity to speak. So it almost becomes like a skill in order to manage those conversations, waiting for that delay. So That would be something. The other thing too is if you do have multiple people on, always remembering your video is on. So sometimes we forget that our video is on, and then all of a sudden we start doing you know, something else goes haywire. So always remember your video is on. Don't forget. If there's a way that you can remember, do that. And then of course, remembering the delays.
Yeah, no one wants to become a viral video on the internet. So like Marianne said, your video is on. I always love to turn my presentations, or really my meetings, any virtual meetings, I love to change the view to gallery view, because then I can see everyone all at once instead of the speaker view. And I find that's really helpful, because then, and I encourage people that I'm in meetings with to do that as well, because then one of the things that you can do is you can respond non-verbally when someone is talking. So you can be nodding, or you can give a thumbs up without the audio trying to switch to you, and then kind of that lapse or that overlap of conversation. It also helps you remember that your video is on when you can see everyone else touching their hair and looking behind them, or getting distracted. Also remember that on a virtual call, maybe if it is a longer webinar or something that doesn't totally have your attention, you should be paying attention. But for goodness sakes, if you're gonna pause and stop to look at your phone, don't hold your phone up here in front of the camera. You can hold it up almost to the screen and still, you know, looking at the camera, but for goodness sakes, don't hold it in front of the camera so everyone else can see you. Because looking at our next topic here, business meetings, making sure that you're utilizing technology correctly and not looking at your phone. You wouldn't do that in an in-person meeting in the office, be texting while the boss is talking. So let's make sure it's not really obvious when the boss is talking on your Zoom webinar either. So again, if you are in an internship for this summer, some of the same things apply for business meetings and presentations, being prepared and punctual. We saw a lot of you actually logged on to this webinar before we even got started at 3 o'clock, which was kind of interesting for us because you could all hear us chatting. Again, even seasoned professionals are kind of getting used to this virtual world, but being prepared and punctual is fantastic. I always love to see students who take notes and do, again, active listening. In fact, it kind of drives me nuts when a student or a young professional comes to a meeting with me and you know they want to ask questions and they want to learn, and they may be doing that, but then they don't take any notes. So for me, that really feels like a waste of time, because if I just told them 10 different follow-up steps that they should take, or 10 different tips that they should take from that meeting with me, it's really hard for me to believe that they're gonna follow through on even 50% of them when they didn't write them down. So I always love to see students and young professionals, and even myself, I always bring a notebook in with me because that's how I remember things, and I write things down, and it validates what the other person is telling you because they can see you writing it down. Also, as a young professional, remember that if you're asked for your opinion, you should share it. I think sometimes we fall into a trap of wanting to listen and learn and absorbing from everyone around us, but we also want to make sure that if people ask for our opinion, that we should really give it. Not everyone knows what you know. In fact, I think a lot of young professionals are probably teaching the seasoned ones a thing or two about virtual platforms and interfaces. So make sure that you're taking advantage of the opportunity of in-person sit-down meetings, or excuse me, even virtual meetings that are bringing together new people that you've never chatted with before. Marianne, what are some of your tips for business meetings and presentations?
I totally agree. Make sure you bring, I can't stress it enough, make sure you bring some sort of like journal and a pen to every single meeting. Everybody that I work with, every single meeting, we never go to a meeting without our little book and our little pen. Every single time. Somebody always writes something. There are a couple of people that actually use index cards. So they must have a different method in which to take notes, and they file them accordingly in their hands or actions. So that's also something that you can do, but I would never go to a meeting without having some sort of paper like a tablet or a journal. I suggest dating every single time that you meet with somebody, put the date at the top, who who the meeting's with or what it's about, and then start your notes, draw a line for the next one. Keeps it nice and well organized. And always simply be present. I've seen people come to meetings, whether they were job shadowing me, where they show up without pen and paper, and they're kind of halfway falling asleep doing, with our meeting, whether we're meeting with other people or we're having our business lunch, whatever it is, kind of starting to melt. Be present. Show that you're actively listening and that what the person is saying, that you really actually care about what they're saying. Good example is I had one colleague that every single meeting, he was late. Every single meeting, he brought his laptop. He was on his laptop the entire time, and then later on would ask what we talked about. Don't do that. Needless to say, he doesn't come to meetings anymore. So the point is you have to have some sort of focus. You have those meetings for a reason, and you're invited into them for a reason. So that needs to be acknowledged, and it's very respectful with your colleagues, and they will respect you back for giving your full attention.
A question just came up in the chat, and I know we're going to do question and answer at the end, but this one relates specifically to what we're talking about right now. And someone asked, is it appropriate to take notes on a laptop? My opinion on that one is I think it really depends on the situation. So automatically, if I see you sitting there with your laptop, my automatic thinking is that you're probably doing something other than taking notes. That you're probably looking at email, you're probably looking at something else, you're not being present, like Mary Ann said. So if I don't know you, this is the first time that we've met, I would really highly suggest writing your notes on paper, because there's no other distractions when it comes to paper. You can be more active and present in that conversation. Now, that changes a little bit if I have a relationship with you, or if I'm in an office culture where they don't do paper, or everyone takes meetings or meeting notes on their laptop. If you're in an office culture like that, or you've developed a relationship with someone so that they know that when you're on your laptop that you're taking notes, then there's much more trust there. And then that's still a great way to take notes. But again, you have to establish that. So you have to show me that if you're on your laptop taking notes, that you're still responding in that meeting and you're still very actively present. You're doing active listening, you're contributing to the conversation, you know what the action items are when you leave the meeting. But again, all of that takes time. So you need to develop that in your professional brand before you break out that laptop to take notes. Mary Ann, any other thoughts on that question in particular?
Yeah, so the one time that, by and large, in our culture, nobody uses their laptop to take notes. They use their journal instead, because they typically use their laptop either for communications or for like their actual work, like spreadsheets and documents and things like that, versus actually note taking. But when they do take notes, it's usually that person in the meeting that has been designated to put together meeting minutes or to populate spreadsheets within the context of that meeting. So if we're gathering information together and they're building something out for the team, and then at the end they share it with the team. So they're actually designated to do that with their laptop. So really, to Rachel, to your point, unless something is established, then use your laptop. Otherwise, typically you might find it much easier that you're not going to want to use your laptop just simply to take notes. It becomes more cumbersome. It's great if you need to retrieve documents and then use an overhead. So I would suggest taking your laptop to a meeting if it's necessary, if you feel like you have something that you need to share. But otherwise, unless it's designated, you probably won't need it.
Thank you. All right. So we've pretty much covered our thoughts about professional brand. Again, nailing all of the little things that can detract from your brand. You want to work on those so that you can really focus on building the positive elements of your brand. So what are some positive trait examples? Things like diligence, authenticity, attention to detail, versatility, and resilience. Those are all examples. Now, they may not be what applies to you. If attention to detail, if that is not your thing, don't fake it till you make it, because people are going to see, they're going to see through that. You want to focus on traits and really highlight traits that are authentic to you. So for example, when I think about my professional brand, I think about leadership, diligence, resourcefulness, and versatility. So this is my professional brand. Now, some of these might sound generic, or they might sound like something I picked just when we were working on this presentation, but it's actually taken years to hone. And personal brand doesn't happen overnight.
Kind of a fun thing to figure out some of these keywords is the workshop that I did. We had to introduce ourselves like right out of the gate. Everybody got index cards. We had to introduce ourselves, and we had to answer like 5 different questions in our introduction to all the people that we were sitting with at our table. And each of these people that we didn't know, which are about tables of 5, they had to write down 5 keywords that they thought you were right away, and they didn't know you, but what was their first impression, and it had to be 1 word. And the cool thing is you passed around this envelope, and so you ended up with like 15 or so of these note cards, and you could see the first impression that you were making. So maybe perhaps if you're struggling with maybe keywords, like if you haven't quite defined like who it is that I want to be, or I think I am, maybe start talking to people that you work with, not necessarily people that are close to you, like close friends or family, but people that are a little removed, and asking them, if you could give me 3 keywords that you think of me that would define me, what would they be? Maybe start doing a little asking around and finding out what those things are. You might be pleasantly surprised. And I was quite surprised at some of the feedback that I got, because I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was a first impression that I made. But some of them were definitely part of my brand, such as creativity. So quite a few people thought that I looked like I was a creative person. So, but that is something I'm also trying to convey. So asking around and maybe trying to figure out what those keywords are that will help you define your brand.
All right. So just a reminder that you can submit your questions in the chat function. That's a great way to stand out to panelists, is to submit those to us. So please make sure that you do, and we'll answer those at the end. So now I want to talk about networking versus building relationships. We just spent a lot of time talking about your professional brand, but if you don't have a professional network to share that with, no one's going to know about your brand. Your brand is really only as good as the people who will vouch for it, and how good as other people think it is. So you want to develop your relationships and get to know people so that they can vouch for your professional brand. Thinking about networking can be a very, very scary topic, especially for students and young professionals who don't do it that often. But it's really important to remember that networking is not about the number of business cards that you have in your desk drawer. It is not about that at all. A bag of business cards is worthless unless you have a handful of people that will back you up, that will vouch for you, that will recommend you. If I'm recommending someone for a job, I'm putting my own professional brand on the line. So I want to make sure that I know that individual really well before I'm willing to give them that recommendation. That takes time. You're not going to develop that attending one networking event or having one conversation with someone at a networking event. Even seeing someone multiple times at different networking events, that still does not a relationship make. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do to really build that relationship so that you have someone to go to bat for you. And really, when it comes to building relationships, what you want to do is you want to build your toolbox so you feel comfortable going to events and interacting with people. You want to be strategic, because you cannot be friends and have relationships with everyone. There's simply not enough time. And you want to stay connected to them. Marianne, what are some of your thoughts about building relationships?
Again, as we had mentioned earlier, being genuine. If you're genuine and you be the person that you are, you're more likely to build genuine relationships, and definitely quality over quantity. And this will cultivate itself as well. Don't wait to start working on this. So now is actually a really good time to start working on it. There are many creative ways that you can start networking and building relationships virtually. So whatever you're doing right now, you're going to start creating that foundation for the duration of your career. So it's not something that you want to wait on or feel like it's, something that you can't do right now, or something that you do for a short amount of time. Okay, now I got the job, I don't have to do it anymore. It's like losing weight. Okay, I lost my 10 pounds, never have to go to the gym again. No, there's maintenance. It's an ongoing thing. It's maintenance. So for the duration of your career until it's time to retire, it's putting your best face forward. What organizations do you want to belong to? What type of information do you need to know? What type of people do you need to know? And how do you get to know them? So this is your good time to start researching those resources and putting together what your strategy is going to be if you haven't already, and start embarking on that now. There's a lot of great organizations out there. Join them. They have free webinars that they're offering right now. I'm sure a lot of them, I know the ones that I belong to, they're offering free webinars. You start connecting with people that way. Also mentorships. I've had some mentorships that have been phenomenal. They don't live in Michigan, they lived in New York City. Those have turned into great long-lasting relationships, but they were all held virtually. Every single meeting, every single correspondence. And those are the people that will help you look for a job, create a great LinkedIn presence, revise your resume, connect you with additional people. And you never even technically have to meet with them, but you can still build that relationship with them.
Great suggestions. All right, so we want to, again, just kind of illustrating this idea of a bag of business cards versus actual relationships. So on my LinkedIn account, I have almost 1,200 connections, but the list of people that I would go to ask for a recommendation, or people that would really go to bat for me, that list is much, much smaller. I can't keep up with 1,200 people. I can't invest myself in 1,200 people. So it's really important to, again, think about investing in those relationships. So how do you cultivate relationships? A lot of the same things that we've already talked about, okay? So being genuine, listening, having small topics prepared, being positive. No one wants to be friends or talk to the person who complains about their 8 a.m. class. When I go to career fairs, if a student complains about being tired because they had an 8 a.m. class, I say, that's great. I was already at the office on a conference call at 8 a.m. So be positive. You can do all of these things at an event, but if you don't follow up with the person, then nothing happens. So let's talk about follow-up. A lot of times in business, we say that what happens before the meeting and what happens after the meeting is more important than the meeting itself. So making sure you're following up with people. That includes follow-up emails. Remember something unique about the conversation and mention it. Later on, when you're checking in with someone, if you get a sale or you achieve something or you graduate, update that person and let them know. A really easy email, this is just an example for maybe today. So thank you for speaking at the COVID College webinar series yesterday. Your tips gave me a lot to think about and practice for my next interview. I put this on the screen so that you can see it, you can screenshot it, and hopefully use it. Sending emails and LinkedIn connections after meeting someone is one of the ways that you can help cement the start of that relationship and start to move that relationship along. And if you're thinking, wow, Rachel, you're gonna get a ton of notes in your inbox tomorrow with thank yous, you're gonna be inundated because you just told us all to do it. That's not true. From all the presentations I do, the response rate is probably about 5% of thank you notes that I get, maybe 5%. And I can tell you that 5%, that those are the students that stand out to me. If you tell me in a year, oh, I was on that webinar that you presented on after COVID, that's great. I'm hope you enjoyed it. But if you haven't talked to me since then, or you never made the step to start a relationship with me, that kind of doesn't matter. So again, we've talked about a lot of scenarios kind of pre-COVID and now that we're in the COVID situation. But so think about this. If Marianne and I were presenting this in a classroom setting, you would be able to maybe ask a question during the presentation or come up to us afterwards and introduce yourself when you're done. Okay, you don't really have that option anymore. That's a great way to stand up presenters, but that's very hard to do in a virtual setting. So sending a follow-up email becomes even more important. All right.
And the follow-up email, sorry, I'm gonna quickly add one thing. With the follow-up emails, that can prompt a second meeting, and it can really prompt a good relationship. So I had a student from Aquinas reach out to me and started doing some Q&A, did some mentorship with her, and it was really great because she actually followed up with me every time that we met, which grew into a great relationship. And not only did I help her get her internship, but then I also hired her to do some contractual work for me. And we kept in touch for a very long time thereafter. So you can really cultivate a nice relationship just by taking that first step and doing a follow-up and, including something really poignant within that follow-up that may prompt that second meeting of sorts, and maybe potentially more thereafter. So don't be afraid to do it. And it only takes one sentence.
Yes, they don't have to be, big composed essays. They are quick emails just to show us that what we said made an impact on you and that you're recognizing the time that we put in and maybe an ask to go forward with a relationship. I'm going to zoom through some of this stuff a little bit quicker because we're kind of running out of time. One of the biggest things about social media, though, I will say, is certainly make sure that everything is appropriate. You guys should all know that by now. I feel like at this point, it's our parents that post more inappropriate things on Facebook. Also, think about, for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, think about following companies that you admire or that you'd want to work for. Because a lot of times that's where they're going to post their job postings first, but it's also a great way to get a sense of what the company does and what they value. And if you interact with that company on social media by liking or commenting, especially if you're applying for a job in the marketing department, chances are that the person that's answering those comments will probably recognize your name. And so that can be a great way to interact with different companies. But I want to get into LinkedIn a little bit because this is one of the biggest tools that you can leverage, and you should really be investing a lot of time right now and a lot of energy into not only making your LinkedIn profile look good, but you also want to make sure that you're really leveraging LinkedIn to do the most for you. So certainly make sure that you have a profile photo. If you're practicing your lighting with your virtual calls, if you don't have a photo yet, snap a photo in your great lighting. Make sure your headline is filled out. If you don't have a current job or internship, talk about what you might be pursuing. So a marketing student pursuing opportunities. You can say something as simple as that for your headline. You can update your profile URL. So that means that you can have a shortened URL that usually reflects your name. That's a great one to do. You can change that in your settings. Make sure you fill out all parts of your profile. So your description, your professional summary, your education, your work experience, your awards and your honors. Make sure that you do that. And then make sure you turn your light on. I'm going to show you how to do this because it can be kind of difficult to find, but there's a setting that you can change that lets recruiters know that you're open to opportunities. So what you want to do is go to linkedin.com/key-settings, and you go to the privacy settings section, and that you want to change that to say yes. So I have it highlighted here on the screen. Again, this is recorded, so you can find this after, and this includes the URL as well. So you want to turn that on so it's easier for recruiters to reach out to you. A couple ways to leverage LinkedIn, and I know someone asked this question already. Connection invites. Do you just hit connect or do you include a note? I get probably 10 connection invitations a day. And I don't accept everyone. And actually, when I go to student events now, because I tell every single student to include a note in their connection invite, now if I get a student, so for instance, if I speak at Aquinas and I get connection invites from a lot of Aquinas students the next week, if they don't include a note, I delete them. That's how you learn. That's what I started doing because I started getting so many connections from people that weren't telling me how they're connected to me. So if you're watching this today and you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's fantastic. But tell me, hey, Rachel, I saw you on the COVID webinar series. Thank you so much. Always include a note. Number one thing to do on LinkedIn. You can ask for recommendations and endorsements. Don't ask for a written recommendation on LinkedIn unless it's from someone that you know pretty well. Make sure that you're liking and commenting and sharing and posting relevant content. LinkedIn should not just be something where you fill out your profile and you send connections and that's it. You can really leverage your feed to really talk about not only what you're doing, but then also to find important content that will help you grow as a seasoned professional. And then search. This is probably one of the most important things that you can do on LinkedIn, is to reach out to people that maybe you don't see on campus or you don't see at networking events. You want to search them through LinkedIn and start that relationship. So I actually pulled up a screenshot here of the best way to do this. So I use Aquinas as an example because Marianne and I are Aquinas alums, but it's really easy through LinkedIn to do an alumni search. And so all you do is you search Aquinas, you'd bring up their college page, and then on the left, there is a selection for alumni. And then you can see everyone on LinkedIn who has listed Aquinas as their school, where they graduated from. So again, sending a note, even to someone that you don't know, that says, I'm a current student at Aquinas, saw that you're an alum of the business program. I'm thinking about pursuing a career in your field. Would you be willing to sit down for a 30-minute informational interview? Easy as that. You can send that in a connection invite. A lot of times they may ask, hey, I'd be happy to communicate with me via email, because I don't look at my LinkedIn all the time. Just make sure that you're staying current with, if you ask someone, make sure you respond when they respond. A few other things here. The app has push notifications for job openings, so you can set what alerts you want. Also, the app is great because it'll tell you when messages come in, especially if you're not actively going to your LinkedIn account to look at it on your laptop or linkedin.com on your phone. You should really be logging into your LinkedIn every day and perusing it just like you would your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed, because that's where you're going to find that good content. But if you are reaching out to people and you don't check every day, I highly suggest adding the app to your phone so you'll get those push notifications in case someone has reached out to you. I know that was kind of fast. Marianne, any other last thoughts about LinkedIn before we move to question and answer?
Actually, you just mentioned it with the app. I swear by the app because it makes it super easy for me to really quickly and easily check, do I have any messages coming through, anybody that wants to connect, new job postings, because you can use those settings and it'll push anything that you might be interested in. So it makes things very quick and easy, and that it never gets away from you. So I'd highly suggest the app.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, we're going to move into the question and answer portion. And I think Bridget is going to moderate our question and answers. So Bridget, what do the panelists have to, what do the attendees have to ask us?
Yeah, so thanks. We had a question from Hannah. Essentially, how do you stay on brand while still being authentic about your weaknesses?
I believe in the weakness sandwich when it comes to an interview. When someone asks about your weaknesses, you always want to be truthful with what it is, but then you want to follow that up with something positive. So what's a situation where you overcame that weakness, or what are things that you're doing to actively work on and improve that weakness? Marianne, how about you?
Yep, exactly. You just said exactly what I would say. Is making sure that you're following up with a positive, or how you could even use that weakness to your advantage. So it's actually not a weakness, it can be turned into a strength. So it's all based on perspective.
Reframing. We love to use the word reframing.
Yeah.
We had some questions about mentoring. So how do you actually, like, how do you get a mentor? Like, you can't just like go shopping at a networking event or track someone down on LinkedIn and say, will you mentor me? That becomes a little bit more organic. But I think, Marianne, you talked about growing that. Whose responsibility is it to keep that going? Is it the mentee or the mentor?
Good question. So how I found my mentors is I belong to, and it's an organization called Cosmetic Executive Women. So it has over 13,000 executives that work in the industry that are available. Those people that want to be a mentor, they sign up to do that. So they actually have an area within the membership where you can actually sign up to be a mentee. I've had a couple of different experiences. One was fantastic. It was definitely, both of us had to equally give in the situation. So she reached out, she was interested in being my mentor. I accepted, we agreed on how it was going to work, how often we were going to meet, what it was that what my objective was, how we got the game plan together, how we were going to meet that objective. It worked out extremely well. We stuck to task, we became friends. The other experience was we finally had one conversation. I followed up. There were crickets, there was nothing. So it really has to be a give-give situation. If you feel like the mentor is not a good fit, you will have to gracefully bow out of the relationship. Don't ghost them. But you will have to have a conversation with them and maybe saying, hey, I'm not sure this is a good time for you, or maybe it's not a good time for me, whatever the case may be. But don't be afraid to find the right fit. But they do become invaluable because they can help you navigate many things within creating your career, helping your career grow, even changing your career. So, as well as your own personal brand.
Great. Well, I know we are at time, so maybe Dana and I can answer some of those questions back to the group on the chat. And Rachel and Marianne, thank you so much. Do you have a final thought or something that has come up for you about your personal brand because of COVID-19?
Oh, that's a good question. Marianne?
Divert to me first. I can tell you that I am seizing the moment because I can. I've got this opportunity to really take a deep dive. Solitude and being separated and having that time to really think and reflect really makes you start picking and choosing, who do you want to be? Why do you want to be that person? What really makes you happy? What makes you tick? What wrecks your world? And what are you going to do to get it? So now is the opportunity to start getting lost in that world, doing the deep dive, retrieving all those great resources and getting excited about what it is that you really want to do and start running after it. Because if you don't, it's not going to be given to you. Somebody else will go out and get it. So now is the time to seize the moment because you have the time to do it and do it.
Yeah, I would say for me, one of the things I always think about is being resourceful. I work for a small nonprofit, and so we have to be very diligent with our resources and kind of think creatively. And so, basically this is a huge wrench to not only my members, the companies that I work with, but then also, the plans that my organization had for the year, this kind of completely derailed it. But instead of saying, well, there's nothing we can do until this is done, we've really tried to think about what are ways that we can pivot our current resources and really still provide, good content and good help to our members. And so, for instance, we have an event called West Michigan Intern Connect. Unfortunately, a lot of internships are getting canceled and some are moving to remote, but we're still doing the event. Instead of doing it in person, we're going to do a virtual event because we feel it's really important for interns and students and young professionals to be able to access that content that we have to share. And so, through a little bit of a pivot and kind of thinking about our resources and what we had in our back pocket, we still want to turn that event into a success. So again, I think, you know, it's thinking about how the situation can reinforce and make those parts of your personal brand stronger because you responded positively versus throwing your hands up and saying, I can't do anything.
Those are all really great ideas and comments, and we appreciate your time in this presentation. I just want to give a reminder, I received a couple of emails from lots of different students from area institutions about this presentation. It is recorded and your career centers will have a copy of the recording. So if you missed it for some reason, weren't able to get on, please contact your career center, schedule an appointment with them while you're there to practice some of these great tips that Rachel and Marianne provided. And then come see us next week when Cindy Brown from The Right Place and members of, well, different institutions will be doing the do's and don'ts of interviewing. So stay tuned for that and hope you have a great day.